the North or South Dakota area where there isn't any available, water through normal plumbing sources. But in this case, would they tap into Gardner's water supply? And I guess second question is, I'm assuming that it doesn't have to be treated water, is that right?
The water comes from the water utility, whatever water utility has jurisdiction in that particular area, as I understand. I think they potentially could drill a well, but I don't, maybe Brian could answer that.
Actually, in this area, Johnson 7 does provide a lot of water. If there's water on site, they could actually use lake water.
That doesn't sound like something the community wants, though, even if it's not our water supply. It's coming from places that we're going to be purchasing from, no doubt.
Well, and Water 7, we participate in the Hillsville area water cooperative with them.
There are some places, I think, frankly, that use gray water and different water resources, so it's not always, it's not necessarily a tax on I guess it's not an absolute that if they are going to be within city limits, that fracking activities will be a drain on the city's water resources. But I think it's logical to say it would be best to guess that it would be, only because they're going to be part of the city's water system if they're within the limits. But it's maybe not necessarily the case if they can get I've seen in other places where they'll get a discounted gray water rate from a different provider, so they will truck it in because it's cheaper than being on the city's water resources, and they can do that. But it doesn't have to be treated, I guess, was the second piece of that. And what I read in my hometown is they had a lot of this back when I grew up.
I might ask Tim, I think they can reuse the water. There's a way for them to reuse the water, is that right?
I think they can. There's sometimes, excuse me.
Yeah. But we have you approach the podium.
I think that the oil and gas operators want to be sure that there's a water compatibility. They don't want to put a chemicals, put water in their formation that will cause it to swell up and just do the opposite of what they want to do, which is open up. So they have a little concern about chemical compatibility, but beyond that, I think that they access lake water, they access groundwater, they access rural water district water, wherever they can get water, if they can meet the chemical compatibility. All those are legitimate sources for their...
I've got a quick question for staff. I know we have an Anna water alert where we were asking residents to limit their water use, not this year. I want to say maybe it was 2012 the last time?
Actually, our water watch just ended about 2 months ago.
Okay.
How many thousands of gallons are we talking about? I mean...
Well, I think there are two questions with regard to the use of water. And I can't answer the number of gallons or barrels that they use in a frac job or a fracture treatment. It's large, but it's a limited amount. It just doesn't go on endlessly. A frac job, these wells that we were discussing here in this area are probably someplace between 1,000 and 1,400 feet deep. And the oil resources are either the Bartlesville sand or another zone called the Squirrel sand. And so they would drill a well, they would then either case it all the way or leave an open hole at the bottom where this sand is, or this productive oil zone. And then they would want to fracture treat that, and as Mike said, under high pressure, they're injecting kind of a slimy material to carry the sand, which is a proppant, and under very high pressure, they inject it to the point that it actually cracks the rocks and creates micro fissures in the rocks. And then the pressures relax, the fluid is withdrawn, and the cracks settle down on the sand grains and prop those cracks open so that the hydrocarbons flow more easily to the wellbore. And then they pump out the fluids and probably acidize it then, and eventually put a pump down there and hope they can produce oil or hydrocarbons. But the question I have is, as has been proposed, I think, they will drill an oil well, and then they want to drill an injector well nearby. Ideally, or in the typically, they will produce kind of an emulsion, oil and water. It isn't just oil or just water. If it's just water, they're through. The well is not productive. They're gonna leave town at that point. But if they're producing this emulsion, they'll separate the oil and water at the surface of the ground, and they'll re-inject the water to help maintain the reservoir pressure, help move that oil to the producing well. And whether or not they have to use makeup water, i.e. more water, on top of the water they're producing, that's an open question. And that's something the operator could only answer for you.
And I believe, Tim, you just answered the question I had, which was, I know that under a lot of the wells that I've investigated on this, they do reuse the water repeatedly within the fracturing
Yes.
process.
Mhm.
So it's not like you're just dumping, tons of water and it's just staying there forever.
Yeah.
You will withdraw it as you want to increase the pressure. You just re-inject that well, or put it through another injection well someplace else close to the site. So you just keep
Yeah.
cycling the water. Now, at some point, you can't do that anymore because the chemical mix is not going to work.
So the operator, generally speaking, is gonna be as efficient about it as they can for their own economic interest.
Correct. You don't have to pay off a ton of money for water.
No.
Yeah, exactly, so.
I think, from my perspective, I guess when we have these discussions, what it comes down to is when we're looking at the areas within the city limits that have opportunities for oil drilling and looking at conditional use permits, it's, at the end of the day, what benefit is it to the city? Is it going to provide extra tax revenues? Is it going to change the property tax values on those lands? Is it going to restrict those from being lands for future development, whether that be commercial that's, greatly needed, or whether it's residential that we talk about the next tier housing in some of these places? I think that's the greater policy question is it a mutually beneficial opportunity for everyone involved? And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think more research, understanding what the cities around us are doing and what they allow and what they don't allow, so that we might be either more in line or either take a more hardline approach, only because we're more landlocked in some areas than some of the other communities around us are, just because of the encroaching Edgerton and Olathe and right around us. The land that we have to protect those resources and make sure that it's available for development in a way that's going to benefit the entire city. I think that's the question it all boils down to me when we talk about drilling is the land's within the city, and at that point, although it may be zoned as ag, maybe that's not the best use for it for a 20, 30, 40-year plan. And once a drill's tapped, and if it's producing oil, we're not going to buy them out of it because that's too expensive of a resource. So that land's done for development for best case scenario 10 years if it dries up. Worst case scenario, I mean, there's drills in Kansas City that are yeah, they're old money now though. That's the old money. Go down around Winfield and Oxford and go talk to those folks that are still producing oil that their granddaddy found. So I don't want to catch us in that same position if there's an opportunity for us to avoid it.
I've got a quick question for Mike. Sorry, Larry, I'll let you in next. Aside from the one particular parcel that's been before the planning commission already, I guess it's coming to council shortly, is there any other organized development efforts in planning for oil drilling inside the city?
Not that I'm aware of. We haven't been approached.
But anything that would happen inside the city is pretty much inside of areas that we have planned as part of the comprehensive plan for future land use, that we had planned for future land use when we did the last comprehensive plan in update in 2008 and the last comprehensive plan in 1998.
Even the plan that's currently in place, anything that's within city limits is for urban development, at least eventually.
So, and that's been that way since the last plan was drawn up in 98. It was just updated in 2008, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, 2008 was the update.
Okay.
What, maybe you addressed this and I didn't catch it, but there's sometimes chemicals injected into the, what chemicals are we talking about?
I couldn't tell you the chemicals. I think we could find out for you typically what is used, but some form of supplementation of the frac fluid is a chemical process to assist in.
Probably, we're not talking, not soap or anything like that, we're talking about, some petroleum distillate.
Well, I think that, this is my personal guess, it would be some kind of